Pretty Girls. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Pretty Girl Be Healed, episode 7. Last episode of the season, Mama. We made it.
We made it, Mama.
We made it to episode 7 of the podcast. So thank you guys for rocking with us for 7 whole episodes to season 1 of the podcast. If you are new, hello, how are you? Thank you for tuning in. We stream live every Friday at 8 p.m. right here on Facebook Live and YouTube. Shout out to our YouTube family. We also post daily content on all of our socials. So make sure that you are liking and following and subscribing. What are you waiting for? Do it right now. On TikTok, we're at Pretty Girl Be Healed. At Pretty Girl B. On Instagram, we're Pretty Girl _B Hill, and we're right here on Facebook. And shout out to our audio listeners on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube Music. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Now that we've gotten all of the celebratories out of the way, we're going to jump right into episode 7. I didn't know how to be a wife.
Yes. Woo, yes. Yeah, see, you know what we be doing, y'all. We be messing ourselves up a little bit.
Yeah.
We been talking about the episode before the episode. We know what we need to start doing, producing. We need to start rolling the camera behind the scenes before we start the episode. But shout out to our producer.
Yes, shout out to Hubs. Y'all, seriously, we got to give him his credit where credit is due. He has held it down. He has sacrificed his sleep and his time for us, and we just appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for your dedication to all of the behind the scenes. You know, you see us as the faces of the brand, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And while we're giving our shout outs, I was going to wait to the end, but I think it's befitting to do it in the beginning because they are not last and they are not least. Shout out to HOG Studios, who has diligently allowed us to inhabit this space for Pretty Girl Be Healed headquarters. So shout out to Apostle Nate and Apostle Maisha. Thank you so much for all that you do. We love you so much and we thank you so much. And every follower, everybody that tunes in Friday at 8 p.m., you could be anywhere, but you choose to be with Pretty Girl Be Healed. So thank you so much for your feedback, your responses, every comment, every like, every share, every support. It does not go unrecognized, and we love you dearly for it. Stay tuned for season 2. There is so much more in store. Like I said, this is episode 7, so we are taking a hiatus, but it's just a plan and to come back even stronger, even greater, digging even deeper. And we will be back after the new year with so much more in store. I want to leak it so bad, but I gotta leave you with a cliffhanger at some point, right? So you'll have something to look forward to when we come back. So without further ado, I didn't know how to be a wife. This is for current wives, former wives, the singles, the interested in dating. For every woman in any facet or stage of your life, this episode is for you. We're going to journey through this episode from 2 different perspectives. And I just think that if you are interested in being a wife, again, or for the first time, if you're interested in dating, this episode is for you because we're literally going to pour out every experience, every challenge, hardship, and every lesson learned in the journey to being a wife, and just wifehood and what that looks like.
Yeah. I think the first place that we need to start, and really that's what Pretty Girl Be Healed is all about, is digging deep to the root and really introspection. But anyone that I speak to who, if they're talking about their significant other, if they've been divorced, if they're in a relationship and they start to bash their significant other, I always have pause for concern. And the reason why is because as I went through my journey of divorce, when I tell y'all, the Lord had to check me a number of times to tell me that, oh no, look at you, boo-boo. And really, when you think about it, you can't control other people. You can't control other people. You may have some control of certain situations, but when you look at a situation, especially if you're not with that person any longer, you have to look at yourself to see what could self do better in that situation. And as I transition from being married to being divorced, the Lord kind of walked me through some of the areas that I needed to change. Because here's the thing, if you are in a situation where you can only see, if you have a victim mentality, right, and you can only see what the other person has done, it does not allow you room to change the things that you need to change for yourself, so that those things are not brought into the relationship that you're supposed to be in. A lot of people, we have a lot of people, broken people who are walking around, and literally it's the same cycle going on over and over and over and over, because you have not addressed the things within you. So today we're going to talk about you. I'm going to share my testimony. My sister's going to share her testimony. But yes, we're going to talk about, I didn't know how to be a wife. I can tell you guys, and I'll start off with this. One moment that I think about when I was newly married, and we were talking about this before we started recording.
Yeah.
But we talked about the whole independent woman syndrome, and I don't call it a syndrome. We talked about the whole independent woman syndrome, and how really it's a trauma response, and how it is really the unhealed version of yourself. Because for somehow in our society, which is anti the word, anti God, is that somehow if you are submissive, that you are diminished to nothing, which is not what submission is. So I can tell you, in my time of being a wife, I enter into becoming a wife as, oh, I'm an independent woman, and I don't need no man to do nothing. And it
Yeah.
really, really was detrimental to my marriage. I remember specifically, there was a situation where I was getting my car fixed. And granted, I was used to doing things for myself. So I do think that as people come together, there will be a learning curve, because we're not perfect, right? And if we're
Yeah.
open to the Holy Spirit, we're open to correction, then it will be corrected. And if you are with the right person, they'll have the grace to say, she's not trying to be, smart. She just need to learn that she need to submit, right? But I remember getting my car fixed, and my husband at the time had went up to the gentleman to discuss what needed to be done with my car. So I went behind my husband. I decided I would go behind my husband and ask the man questions, when really I shouldn't interfere in that situation. I should have just let him handle it. And that behavior right there continued to um prevail throughout my entire marriage. So I just wanted to start there, just from having the independent women syndrome, not allowing my husband to be a husband, to be the leader of my house, to be the priest of my house. So I'll start there.
You start at a really good point, because you talked about introspection, you talked about independence, you talked about your stance as a wife, in a marriage. And I think that it's a great starting point, because I think we missed the mark going into the marriage a certain way.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that we go into the marriage unprepared. Because, and the reason why I say that is that the journey to being a wife does not begin when you say I do.
Yeah.
If your journey to wifedom begins at the moment that you say I do, you're already behind the curve.
Yeah.
Because you don't show up at the altar and then become a wife. You are a wife the moment you decide that you're ready to date. So going back to that point of introspection, you have to do the work internally to even decide that you're ready and in a place to be a wife way before you become a wife. And if you don't make up your mind that you're wife material from the moment you make the decision to seek a significant other, to go through the dating process, all of those things, you're behind the curve. Now, what I'm saying does not mean that you show up in relationships doing wifely duties. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that before you get to the altar, before you put on a white dress, before you accept the ring and say I do, there has to be that introspection and that process to say I am a wife today. And before my husband comes along, I exhibit all of the qualities, all of the characteristics and the nature by heart to be the wife that I am called to be. So I think that, we get tied up in the big rings and the white dress and the pomp and the
Yeah.
circumstance and the wedding. And it's like, do you want to be a
It's a
wife or do you want
mirage.
a wedding?
Yeah.
Because there's a difference. Do you want to be a wife or do you just want a wedding? Because baby, save yourself the aggravation, save yourself, the headache and the heartache, and just go have a party if that's what you're looking for. But if you're coming to the place where you make the decision that I want to be a wife, that means that there is work that you must do inwardly. There are changes that you're going to have to make, and you have to position yourself to be a wife way before your husband comes
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
And we all, and I'm not saying that we often make the mistake. I made the mistake. I got married very young. So my learning curve came with a need for maturation, a need for so many things because I knew how to prepare for the wedding. I did the marriage counseling,
Yeah.
all of those things that we were supposed to do. I learned along the way, but there was so much more that I needed to learn about me,
Yeah.
about myself. There were things that I learned from experiences watching other married couples, my parents, that I needed to dig a little deeper and decide who I was going to be as a wife before I ever said I
Yeah.
do. So I
Yeah.
think that introspection is a really good segue or introduction into what it is that we're talking about, because it's important to understand that after you say I do, after the gifts have been dropped off, after the guests have gone home, after you've taken off said dress, there is a life that you must be prepared for after all of the hoopla is over. Every
Yeah.
congratulations, and the photographer done packed up his kit, and the videographer done went home, and y'all done ate the expensive meal. There is a life that you must be equipped for post wedding. So I think it's very, it's equally, it's so important to start our pen there,
Yeah.
because you need to be a wife before there ever is a wedding. You need to be a wife before you ever enter into the covenant of marriage.
Yeah. It's interesting because our apostle had asked us a question before we started recording. And he said, if you could give your past self advice now, would you have listened to her? And I said, absolutely not. I would like to think that I would have listened, but I was super, super hard headed. And it's so funny. I have even people around me who kind of had that same mindset. And really, when you dig deep to the root, it just goes back to unresolved trauma. When I think about talking to my former self, I was heavily broken, heavily rejected. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard, even when I didn't need to be heard. I had deep seated mommy issues, deep seated daddy issues. So, bringing all of this into a marriage, it's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about being in a marriage and you can't nobody tell you nothing. Oh, honey. Oh, sir.
Yeah.
That is a very, very bad starting point because you're always going to be in conflict.
Yeah.
If nobody can't tell you nothing, you always gonna be in conflict. They can't give you advice on some things that need to be done in the house. They can't give you advice on some things that they might be noticing
Yeah.
as you come together. Because when you come together as man and wife, you are coming together as one, but that is difficult. When you think
Yeah.
about two adults coming together who have two different sets of viewpoints, no matter how much you love each other, because let me tell you something, love without submission is not enough. If you do not submit, you're going to have trouble. So as I enter into this thing, you couldn't tell me nothing. My
Yeah.
husband couldn't tell me nothing, and I didn't even. And there was even some things in that space where he was giving me feedback on that I needed to hear. But not only could he couldn't tell me nothing, but I was so you know how you have somebody and stuff that's go right over their head.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even in a space where I could hear or understand what he was trying to say to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would caution the women um, who really aren't, who say to themselves, "Oh, I'm just this way. Oh, you're gonna be just this way." Divorce.
Single.
You're gonna be,
Period.
and I don't care if you're married for 5 years, 10 years. At some point, it's going to become an issue. If you were a woman who talks down to your man, and I'm gonna keep it 100. You calling him a nigga, you calling him
Yeah.
a B,
Stupid.
stupid,
Mhm.
dummy. You need to reevaluate yourself
Mhm.
because your significant other is supposed to be the priest, like the priest. And for some of y'all need to look up what a priest is of your home. He's supposed to be the leader of your home. Why talk to your man like that?
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but is no, I don't hate to say it. Because we here, it's very prevalent in the African American community.
Yeah.
And in a way in which we even interact with each other. We don't speak to each other in love. So even if that's you, who you talking to your man any type of way, or if you're a man and you talking to your woman any type of way, you need to really evaluate why that's taking place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even if you can't speak from a place of respect,
Mhm.
you really, really might need to take a second thought about whether or not you need to be married.
And let's even explore the danger of that. And I'm gonna be very, very, very honest and dig into the root today, right? Because that's what we do. And my husband and I have been married for 11 years. Next year will be 12. And I'll be honest, this topic is me. I did
Uh-huh.
not know how to be a wife.
Yeah.
And at very early on in our marriage, and I'm grateful that we've come leaps and bounds, and it's so much different now. But it's that, like we talked about, it's a journey, and it took a journey for us to get where we are today. And I did not know how to be a wife early on in my marriage.
Yeah.
Submission was a whole cuss word. You were cussing at me if you telling me to be quiet and submit, because I very much was like, oh, I need you, but I don't want, I want you, but I don't need you.
Yeah.
Which is crazy thinking for somebody that you're saying is your spouse. And I had control issues. So, when I wanted it, how I wanted it, and you had to tell me how you was going to do it, and, all of these things, when I just needed to submit. But let me tell you, anybody that's watching or listening to this, the danger of not submitting properly. And let me be clear, so your submission does not minimize your ability to lead, but you are not the leader. The other piece of this is that let's talk about what lack of submission from the lens of a wife does to your husband, because I did this to my husband. I wanted the control. I wanted the final say. I wanted the final answer, to the point where I took the power of my husband's voice almost away from him, in a sense. I'm speaking from me, not, this is not his words, but I look back on some of the things that I did, the control that I had, the things that I said, and I literally would undermine any decision that he wanted to make because I thought my way is best. And danger to any of you who do this, because you run the risk of almost snatching his power away, or his ability to make decisions and have that leadership ability as the leader of your house, because you have so much to say about what you think should happen. And don't get me wrong, that this is not control and manipulation form, but there is a partnership. So yes, you will have a say, but your say is not the say. And when you have taken a spouse to be the leader of your house, you can have that level of partnership, but he has the final say.
Yeah.
And I found myself in some ways saying he would make a decision and I would completely undermine it and be like, oh, no, we're going to do it this way. So, we do that, especially as Black women. Let's put it on the table. We will do that and then get mad when they don't make said decision.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't have so much to say and gave this man a lecture for 30 to 45 minutes about what it is you thought was the right way to do it. That what are they going to waste words for?
Yeah.
What are they really talking about if you have
Yes.
already made the decision for them? You literally take the ability for them to lead away from them because you think you have the right answer. And even if your answer is right, you're still wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to piggyback off of that, I just going back to how you speak to him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I spoke disrespectfully to my ex-husband, but after I was divorced and was in a relationship, I definitely did so to my boyfriend at the time. And the words that I used was very inflammatory. It was very much emasculating, and just drawn off of what you were saying about not allowing them to lead, and literally taking away that power. We do that and how we speak to a person. So it's literally very, very important. It is so prevalent. And I don't even want to say that it's just prevalent just in the Black community. I definitely see it a lot in the Black community. But again, looking at the root, I can tell you myself, I I came from a very, very strong woman, a very strong woman who, taught me. She had to raise him by herself. So, what she knew was that you don't need a man to do nothing, and she didn't feel like you need a man to do nothing because she didn't have a man to do it. So that was instilled in me as from a very, very young age, just not needing a man, not submitting, and being able to do all these things on my own. And I can tell you one thing, in the dating phase, in the married phase, it's going to be a recipe for a disaster. Because let me tell you, boo
Mhm.
boo, the independent life, honey,
And you know what's funny is I was taught the
get
opposite.
somebody else to do it.
For me, it was my father that was
Uh
like,
huh.
"You don't need a man for nothing. You get your education, you make your own money,
Yes.
you do it for yourself, yourself, yourself." And when you hear that for so many years of your life, I was like, "Oh, I got this.
Yeah.
I got this." And I didn't really know. And, my mother definitely submitted to my father in many ways, but it never, because my father was that voice of reason, that little voice in the back of my head telling me to get it for myself.
Yeah.
I could not piece together like you can get it for your family, not just yourself,
Yeah.
and still be submissive to your husband because I was like, oh, I got to control this. No, this is what we doing. Like this
Yeah.
is it. Not realizing that you now have a spouse. What are you doing? You're gonna crush your marriage, or the ability to have one just by the way I wanted things done.
Yeah.
Because it was my way, and you got something to say, oh, I said it's my way.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it's like, wow, I'm surprised he ain't divorced me,
Yeah.
off of the things that I would do back then that would literally, it has the ability to crush their egos.
Yes.
It has the ability to silence them in situations where they need to be the voice of
Yeah.
reason. And let's talk to the single ladies and the ladies that might be engaged or on, that are on this path. It's very, very important to learn this early on so that you don't have the problems in your relationship later.
Yeah.
It's very important to know early on that if this is the man that you're saying is going to be your future spouse, is your spouse, fiance, whatever, it's important to understand that you taking the back seat, and when I say back seat, it's just coming into agreement with his leadership style and what it is that he says. It doesn't make you less than.
Yeah.
Somehow we've equated this to mean that, well, if he has the final say, my voice doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Who told you that?
Yeah.
Who told you that? A lot of the decisions, especially now that I've grown and matured in my marriage, a lot of the decisions is a discussion. Hey, babe, this is a situation that we have to decide on. What are your thoughts? Well, I was thinking this. And he's like, all right, well, let's hash it out. Let's talk about it. Let's dialogue about it. And we have these very healthy conversations. And then my husband says, well, babe, we're going to do it this way. And I just say, okay.
Yeah.
And he never, just because he's made the decision doesn't mean that he's devalued my input.
Yeah.
We would talk about the Proverbs 31
Yes.
woman
I literally got it
earlier.
out, so I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read
Yeah,
it.
we were talking about Proverbs 31 woman earlier, and this one was an entrepreneur.
Yep.
This woman, did so many things,
Wise.
and the Bible talks about that her children rise up and call her blessed.
Yeah.
It goes into, and when Kawana reads it, you'll have it in your hearing, but in no way, shape, or form did it ever say that this woman degraded her husband, devalue her husband, talk
Yes.
bad about her husband. She was about her business. She had this strength and this virtue about her that made her the Proverbs 31 woman
Yes.
that she was. However, and nowhere in that scripture does it say that she emasculated her husband.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to read from the NIV version, and the title is "The Wife of Noble Character." So it's Proverbs 31 and 10 for anyone who wants to read during or after our podcast. But it says, a wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the staff. and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Listen, y'all.
It's so much. I'm getting like I literally got chills
Uh-huh.
because read. Can you just do me a favor real
Uh-huh.
fast and read the last verse?
Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate.
So and even to that last part of the scripture, at no point are you less than honorable
Yeah, it says honor her.
for because her children and her husband rise up to call her blessed,
Yeah,
which means that you are not devalued or discredited or counted out because your
yeah,
husband makes the final decision.
yeah,
And I think that in today's world, the reason part of the reason why we are the way we are in terms of us women is because somehow we've equated their leadership to mean that we're not able to lead.
yeah,
But as you see, this woman was an entrepreneur. She was a business owner. She was different things within that context that being a wife didn't take away from those things.
yeah,
She could still be who she is because outside of being a wife, there is still so many things that we are, that we do, titles we carry, businesses we carry, all of those things. But somehow we've equated the fact that we're on the journey to be a wife to mean that we don't have a voice or
yeah,
the value. And that's not true.
yeah.
That's not true. But at the end of the day, if you are becoming a wife, the wisdom in the room says you're smart enough to not be the smartest person in the room.
Yes, and that's wisdom. That truly is wisdom. And when I think about it, I think one other thing that we need to address when it comes to submission is, women when they are in a leadership role or they're making more money than
Oof.
their significant other, and that they're less than because they're making more because you are making more money than them. And let me tell you, let me be honest, I was there.
Yeah.
I was there, and it wasn't necessarily with my ex-husband, but with my boyfriend at the time. I literally looked down at him. I'm like, "Oh, I'm the breadwinner in this house. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what you do? You got your little job that contribute, but." And I really had this braggadocious, prideful perspective about the roles in our relationship, and that is also a space where you are emasculating.
Yeah.
You are emasculating your significant other, and it has nothing to do with them being less of a man, because
Mm-hmm.
we're going to dispel that right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It has everything to do with they love you and they trying to stick with you, but you're behind.
Yeah.
And in the midst of them trying to stick with you because they love you, it bows this toxic relationship, and they start to get emasculated because I'm trying to love this person. I mean, it's likened to abuse, really is abuse, because and people don't really understand the power of words. The word says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. You really are speaking death over your significant other when you are putting them down in this way. But let me tell you, honey, the Lord will humble you like he humbled
Right,
me.
because the reality is the truest level of not only submission, but also respect and honor
Yeah,
for your husband is that you are, because I've been there. Me and my husband have almost taken turns at one point of our
yeah,
marriage being the breadwinner. But the fullest sign of surrender to the father, submission and honor to your husband is being the breadwinner, quote unquote, meaning
yeah,
that you make more than your spouse, or you might even be the one that has the job. Maybe your spouse doesn't have a job at the time. the greatest form of honor you could ever do to your or ever show rather to your spouse is to bring the funds you bring in
Yeah.
to your husband, your spouse, and you allow him to lead in the finance department, knowing that you made the money.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it's y'all's, and that's the other thing too. When you come into a covenant, because that is what you're coming into. You have to the word says you come as one. So, I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, it's my money." Oh, is it? It's my this and it's my that. But you have to change your perspective. If you go into a marriage thinking that, this is my own and this is my own and this is my own. And yes, there's going to be some aspects like my sister was just talking about. You still want to have your own things going on and things like that, which you are assigned to. My leaders were talking about this the other day. What we are assigned to as husband and wife is going to differ. The people who we are called to is going to be different. However, there are some things that collectively need to come together in order for a household to run. And if you already have the mindset that you're going to be separate, well, boo boo, how you going to be one?
Yeah.
How are you going to be one?
Yeah.
And that is, I see a lot of women too who, the man is coming into the house, or they might they might decide to come from two cars to one car, and then they don't then, the one person who has the asset, whatever it is, the house, the car, or whatever, doesn't want to share. Like you can't be that way. And I remember, and this was not in my marriage, but it was when I was in relationship, and this is before. Listen, no judgment.
Is what it is.
I was shacking up. Let me put it out there. But I can tell you that once he came, it was like he was invading my space, and I really was not prepared to share my space with anyone. So I would say for anyone who is looking to be married, if you're in that space of singleness, just allow the Lord to process you. Getting past all of the traumas, all of the perverted perspective that you might have, being in a place where, if you're selfish, putting you in a place where you're selfless, allowing, if you're prideful, allowing God to humble you or reveal to you the things that are unlike him, so that you can be productive in that relationship. Because let me tell you something, if those things are not dealt with, you're just going to bring them into the relationship, and you probably 100% will see the same cycles repeat again. The other thing I would say is you have to understand long suffering, because in a marriage there are some one of them storms that you had to weather. My sister here was just talking about, a lot of people think about the wedding and the ring, and I see a lot of people, and that is the thing. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do with the marriage? And then when, and God forbid any of these things happen, if someone gets sick, or if someone loses a job, or if the children start acting up, how you going to get through it if you ain't got no prayer life? If your husband is going through it about something, how you going to cover him if you don't know how to intercede on his behalf? And my sister even talks about, the husband making the decision. And we're not perfect. Sometimes we might make a decision that's not in the best interest of our household. But however, you still can submit, and then you go to the Father to pray on the behalf of your husband. And that's the way that's done. And I was saying, when I look at my marriage, it was devoid of prayer. And the only time I prayed to God when it came to my marriage, and this was some years ago, and the only time that I prayed was when we were separated. And at that point, if I hadn't been if I hadn't been praying when I should have been praying, we probably would have never got married.
I agree. So I think that, in the journey to becoming a wife, the foundation is key. And I think that, starting kind of where we were, though that introspection
Yeah,
is so critical, because you'll do better in those years with your
yeah,
spouse and in the long run if that introspection is there, because there's so many things you need to ask yourself.
yeah,
What's the purpose?
yeah,
What are you adding to him, and what is he adding to you?
yeah,
What's the motive?
yeah,
Can you sustain in the hard moments?
yeah,
there are going to be hard moments in a marriage.
Yeah.
There's going to be hard moments in your relationships. If you can't withstand the small drops, the storm is going to take you out.
Yeah.
For example, money.
Yeah.
Do you want a financee or do you want a fiance?
Listen, here, you better tell them.
There are going to be times where, like I said, and we've been the breadwinners.
Yeah.
And I've made the mistake of making my husband feel less than.
Huh.
Let me be honest. This is what we gonna do. I got married at 22 or 3, y'all. So I had a whole lot to learn.
Yeah.
However, do you want to finance? Because what burns my gears these days is we get into the singles topic. So I'm gonna try to make it, keep it at the wifedom.
Yeah.
But I'm sick of these lists.
Yeah.
I'm sick of the list because you're creating something that is really just a falsity anyway.
Yes.
But be careful that you are not entering into these situationships and relationships and whatever unprepared in your journey as a wife, and you get caught up in these things that really don't matter in the end. The finances, and he has to look this way, it has to be this way, because 9 times out of 10 this little list you got, he ain't coming that way. He's not coming that way. So I think it's understanding the foundational is very important. Understanding integrity in the relationship is equally as important. Do yourself the favor, pretty girls, right now. Keep your family, keep your friends out of your relationship. Keep them out. One of the biggest mistakes I made as a wife, full on transparency, is not keeping things between me and my husband. And while I might have been doing it with the intention of wise counsel, it wasn't wise. So the things that go on in your households, needs to be worked out between you and your husband before you ever take it to somebody else. Under no way, shape, or form should you ever man bash to your girlfriends, and stuff get rough. So sometimes you might be going for wise counsel, and I'm not discrediting that. But if it starts out with this man and this nigga, there and your friends don't check you, get new friends. Watch episode 1, the cost and process of friendship. But on top of that, understand that the words you put out, you cannot get back. So now if I'm talking to you, you got this skewed perception of my man, and when he doing right, I'm coming back and you're like, well, girl, he ain't nothing. I'm like, what you say? But it was my words that started that to begin with, because in a moment where I should have made it right with my spouse, I decided to man bash. And that's not okay. Not only do you devalue your relationship, but you're also devaluing him. You're devaluing you in the process. Keep it between y'all, especially in a marriage. It's such a sacred thing. It should be no reason, and we make mistakes. I'm not bashing none of us, because I've been there, and there's no judgments on this platform because I've done it. However, hindsight is so clear, and it's so 2020. There are certain things I wouldn't have said. There's certain things I wish I could take back. Like I said, my husband has suffered long because we could be divorced, but God, especially with the way that I acted. So just considering, consider both sides. Consider the part that you're playing, because it's not always them. It ain't always them. Sometimes it's our responses. It's our control. It's all of these things that that we create the hardship in our marriages. And we want to point the finger, and say like, oh, well, they started it. Even if they started it, the fact that you responded to what was initiated makes you equally as wrong. And if you don't have the ability to suffer long, if you don't have the ability to be patient, if you don't have the ability to recognize that neither one of you are perfect, like you talked about earlier, and that mistakes are going to happen, and that relationships and marriages transition over time. So the person you met at day 1 is not going to be the person that you know at day 60. And you have to be able to roll with the punches. And if you can't, reconsider if you're ready. Because here's the thing, we ain't dating with dinners. We're not dating for trips to ice cream. We ain't dating for Starbucks. The intentionality behind dating is to determine, is this person worth your time for the long haul, to be a husband, to be a spouse, and so these things matter.
I did a lot of putting my family into situations in my marriage when we were together, and ultimately what it comes down to is being founded. If you don't have a conversation, an intimate relationship with the Lord, where you can have those conversations with him and say, Lord, this happened, because sometimes It might be so heated with your husband that you can't even have that conversation with him, or it's not wise for you to have that conversation where you
Yeah.
need to even seek counsel from the Lord before you even have that conversation. And again, it just goes back to a firm foundation and just being able to have that dialogue back and forth with the Lord. I can tell you, in my season of singleness at this point, the Lord is definitely teaching me that lesson. Some things is not for public consumption. Even when it comes to our relationship, we were very, very close. But there were things that she had to take straight to the Lord. There are things that I had to take straight to the Lord. And we understand that, right? We are all working on our own soul salvation, right? And then when it comes to her relationship with her husband, there were times she put me on mute real quick. Why didn't have that conversation? That's respectful, right? I don't need to know all their business. And she stewards her relationship with her marriage, because I don't need to be involved in it. And that's what everyone across the board needs to do, because it's not your girlfriend's business, it's not your mama business, it's not your daddy business, it's not nobody business. Even having conversations about your husband in front of your kids,
Yeah.
that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
you know and even there are even some people now who are not in a relationship, and you have these tendencies to gossip and backbite and all those things need to be taken care of, because all those things are just going to bleed right into the marriage.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very, very important that you remain integral.
Yeah,
Like some things in your journey to wifehood, there's a level of maturity that you know when to say something
yeah.
and when to
And when you
hush.
gotta be quiet, ooh,
And when
that
to
holy hush,
hush.
yes.
That silent pause will save you thousands of dollars in couples counseling. It'll save you nights of going to bed, not speaking.
Yeah,
It'll save you the misunderstanding and miscommunication if you just take those pauses. And
yeah,
that's in any stage of the relationship. Maybe you're not married yet, but you're in this journey and you guys are talking marriage and you're working through towards that place.
yeah,
Like you save a lot of time later on if you learn these things now.
yeah,
Because, you don't want to create a situation where the marriage doesn't work or anything like that when you can learn from these things now, like take our lessons and our hardships just as nuggets towards even strengthening your current relationships, or maybe you're single and you are you're dating, just trying to decide, are you ready for this, in your readiness or in your grace to be ready, consider these things so that when you're having these conversations and you're trying to decide if these men are worth your time, you have already stepped in the door as a wife.
excuse me.
That first coffee date, that first restaurant date, that first whatever your first
And don't
outing
you say ice
is.
cream date.
Oh Lord. That first outing, you are not showing up as a girlfriend. Understand, your mindset starts from that moment you say, yes, we're going to dinner at 7. That
Yes.
or that first hello or that first how are you. You are showing up in the wifedom.
Yes. And what else that just came to mind as I was sitting here is being overcritical. And because I was dealing with self insecurity with myself, I was so overly critical to the point where, two things. Love languages. I want to come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that. But I was so overly critical, and the Bible and Proverbs, and I'm not saying it verbatim, but it talks about um a quarrelsome woman. I think it says in some versions, like a man would rather live on a roof than deal with a quarrelsome woman or a nagging woman, right? And some of us nag and complain and can't see the light about anything, and then we want to pick apart everything that we say, and the Lord really showed me this about myself through some of the people who were in my circle. And it's like you cannot think, even in that, a man might be okay for the first few years of your relationship, but it's definitely not something that's going to fly when you are continually jabbing at somebody's personalities, how they do things, XYZ. And again, it just goes back to being processed. The one thing that it might seem like it's a simple thing to understand, but that people don't think the same way.
Mm-hmm.
People don't do things the same way. Just because XYZ did something different than how you did it, don't mean it's the wrong way.
Yeah.
And if it was the wrong way, what you need to do, what we talking about, you need to be praying, right? And even in these times where you might think that there might be some conflict before said thing needs to be done, make sure you lubricate that situation with prayer. That you're praying about it before the situation even takes place. So I would caution anyone who is hypercritical, right? And if you are hypercritical, to dig to the root of where that hypercriticalness, if that's a word, comes from. The second thing I would say is it comes to understanding how somebody wants, not only wants to be loved or needs to be loved, right? But also how they love you. Right. Because I think that we go into relationships thinking, well, this is what I like. So this is how it's going to take place. And one of the huge mistakes that I made was one, I had no idea anything about love languages, that there was a difference. Like, and y'all might be like, girl, but yeah, girl, I didn't know. So when it came to how I was being loved, I could not identify that this was his way of showing me that he loves me, because I could not identify it with different ways. And it's really, really important. Even when I think about my relationship with my children, my son has different needs than my daughter. And I realized very early on when I was trying to love them in a blanket way that it was not working. And it's the same way when it comes to relationships. It's the same that way when it comes to being in a marriage. Even when you think about your friends, if you have different friends, your interactions with them, the way you love them is going to be different. And it's no different when it comes to being in a relationship. So I would even in your strategic prayer, ask the Lord, how does my husband like to be loved? What is he like? Because the Lord will prep you for these things so that once you walk into that thing, you are prepared. Sorry, y'all. I'm so
It's fine.
congested.
No, it's fine. Listen, we both struggling today, but we gonna get through it.
Yes.
I equally echo the ask him.
Yeah. Ask him.
Ask him.
Yes.
I feel like sometimes in relationships we overcomplicate things
Yeah.
when there could be a level of clarity if you just ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And not from a judgmental standpoint, not from any point of contention. But there was certain things I learned just by asking the questions. No
Yeah.
assumptions.
Yeah.
It wasn't about what I wanted. But literally, I would just ask the right questions and found myself getting the answers because there was an open line of communication.
Yeah.
And I think that as it pertains to love languages, my love language has shifted.
Yeah.
So one love language in one season is not going to be the same love language in the next season.
Yeah.
I like gifts. I love gifts.
I was about to say.
I'm a girly girl, but I love and not just any gift. You can't just go and get me whatever. Like that's not that. But meaningful gifts, meaning that you've taken the time to listen to what it is I
Yeah.
liked, and you don't have to go get that exact thing. But if you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the
Yeah.
aisle, that is meaningful to me because it shows me that you listen and you're attentive to the things that I enjoy. And I'm still very much that way. But in this season of my life, words of affirmation are so much more
Yes.
meaningful than the previous stages of my life. Whereas, I didn't need the "oh, you got this" because I know I had it.
Yeah.
But part of, my growth process and the transition process over the years has looked like sometimes, though I'm a natural born leader and all of those qualities, sometimes I just need the reminder, like, you got this.
Yeah.
So I think that, we would resolve a lot of other arguments and disagreements if we kind of had these check-ins with each other. And this can happen at any stage in your relationship. If you're dating, if you're a fiance, if you're married, you've been married 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I think that it's equally as important to have these check-ins to kind of gauge the thermostat in your relationship. Where are we? What are our goals? What are our short-term goals?
Yeah.
What are our long-term goals? And I ain't talking about Steve Harvey. I'm talking about that literal intentional conversation where you assess where you are, assess the strengths of the two of you individually that you bring as a collective in a relationship, and really have those hard conversations, knowing that you're not bashing each other.
Yeah.
There's no pointing a finger, but you're mutually growing together. And that's how you sustain a marriage. It's more than just sex. Let's call it out. Like, it's more than just sex. It's more than just the intimacy part in that way. But there's a level of intimacy in a marriage where you can literally finish each other's sentences. distance is.
Yeah.
There's a level in relationships where you know when
Intimacy.
right,
Yeah.
you know when that person is going to tick if you say something the wrong way. But it comes with, truly knowing your spouse and knowing you.
Yeah.
No, knowing you. It starts with knowing you. You can't know your spouse if you don't know you.
Yeah. I would piggyback off of that and to say that you had to be in a space where you can receive love. This not necessarily dealing with being a wife, but I remember my daughter had said something to me, and she said, she just really wanted to spend time with me. And it dawned on me, I'm like, oh, my daughter really likes me. And she just wants to love on her mother, And even when it comes to receiving gifts and receiving compliments and receiving praise, it's uncomfortable for me. And I had to really delve deep to why that space is uncomfortable. Because if you're in a space where you can't even receive the love, how you gonna identify when it's trying to permeate you? And really, again, it just all goes back to your relationship with God. That's where I'm always going to point it back to, because that is my process. So when you understand how the Father loves you and how his love permeates you, then it primes you for the love that you can receive, and not even just from your spouse, but your friends. I mean, me, shit, I have these conversations all the time. Your friends, whoever, you'll be able to receive what people are trying to give you.
Yeah. I think the next place I want to go to is understanding that you have to here. I want to ask our fellow pretty girls a question. And anybody that's watching, are you really ready to be a wife?
Yeah, listen,
Are you
listen.
really ready to be a wife? Because let's go there for a second. Are you? We didn't know how to be wives at various stages in our relationships, and then the dynamics of past marriages, relationships. But
Yeah,
are you ready to be a
yeah,
wife?
yeah,
Have you addressed the trauma
yeah,
triggers? Because if you're coming in with trauma, baby, sit down. I'm
yes,
gonna just tell you now, sit down. Because if you haven't addressed the trauma triggers before your journey into wifehood and marriage, understand this: those triggers are going to be tried
yes,
in a marriage.
yes, yes. You know what's so interesting? Excuse me, guys. I laughed because I was having a mentorship conversation with my mentor, spiritual mother, and my leader. And we were talking about dating, because I think that, as you journey towards wifedom, or even if you are a wife, it's good to have a mentor, um, or someone who is a role model who has successfully navigated the winds of marriage. But anyway, I was talking to her, and we were talking about dating. So she asked me that very question so lovingly. She said, "Do you think you're ready to date?" Some of y'all ain't even ready, let alone be a wife. Honey, you're not even ready to date. And I don't say that, in jest, or say that to condemn, but just consider that if you are not healed in the places that you need to be healed, as my sister would just talk about, the trauma, the pain, you potentially could hurt somebody's son.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, I don't play with the Lord's sons. Okay. I don't ever want somebody to be hurt in my hand. And I think, again, it just goes back to introspect. Am I ready to go through this process? The other reason why it was funny, I was talking to someone who was potentially interested in dating me, and something has transpired. Excuse me, guys. Some things transpired that were triggering to me. I'm talking about, it brought me back to a place, of past relationships. But what I did was I decided I'm not gonna ghost them. You know, I'm going to tell him why this upset me, and go from there. Even if it doesn't mean that we're going to progress forward in a relationship, but at least he'll know. And I
Mhm.
and I think, even just going back to, relationship with your husband and wife, relationship with your significant other, as you progress toward a covenant relationship, if that's God's will for that relationship, y'all, we gotta grow up, because ghosting people is so corny.
Mhm.
Like, why don't we communicate and tell people why something happened. Because a lot of times, like I've seen so many people literally, and I'm going on a tangent here, but stay with me for a second.
So go with
So
it.
so many people, they have an issue, right? And I like to say nose blind. They're completely nose blind to it. They don't know that it's something that they're actually doing. Like, and I think a lot of times we don't give people the benefit of doubt. We don't give
Yeah.
them no grace. We just write them off. Like we gotta stop writing people off. And we gotta start, being bold enough to give them the feedback. I didn't like this because you because you always want to take me out on an ice cream date.
Y'all, don't. Ain't nobody stunting. Listen, there is nothing wrong with a little ice cream date. Shout out to Taylor. It's an insider, but there's nothing wrong with the ice cream dates. Don't
Yes,
let
I'm
Kawana
messing.
fool you. I'm
I'm
just
messing.
playing.
I'm messing. But tell them why you were upset. There's a lot of people, and then a lot of people hold it in. Now you angry, and even if it trigger you, right? Sometimes it's stuff that happened that really legitimately points to it, not that night being the person to you for you, right? But at least have the conversation, because misunderstandings will take place. I know of a beautiful kingdom couple that as they were journeying toward marriage, there were a lot of obstacles that came along across the way. And you have to, again, what does the enemy do? Try to steal, kill, or destroy. Try to bring division. And if it's a kingdom covenant, you better believe that there's some obstacles that are going to come that way. So, but if you can't communicate, how are you going to come together? And I was about to talk about obedience, but I'm just going to stop right there.
Listen, no, that holds so much truth. 2 weeks before, our marriage has been under attack for years. That's no secret. It's no secret at all. We have definitely progressed through much.
Yeah.
We've been through much. For those of us that have known us the duration of our marriage, the attacks happened 2 weeks before I said I do.
Uh-huh.
I was ready to call the whole thing off.
Yeah.
Like legit, Sister Steph, no. However, when you consider that this marriage isn't for show,
Yeah.
it's not for pomp and
Not
circumstance.
for
It's not
Instagram.
to it's not to walk around like this. Like it's none of that. When I understood the assignments behind my marriage,
Yeah.
I couldn't abort the mission prematurely.
Yeah.
So it's very important to understand that you're gonna go through things. You're going to face challenges, especially as you're navigating life in the different forms, because the person that you marry, y'all start off one way and then you'll incorporate kids and
Yeah.
pets and
Yeah.
jobs and life and school and, endeavors. Things change over time. But this is the importance of understanding and having the level of understanding from the beginning.
Yeah.
From the beginning,
Yeah.
from the very, and really just understanding that, you're in it for the long run, you're in it for the long haul, and you got to stick it out. Sometimes it's gonna be knuck if you buck in there, but understand obedience, submission, all those things that we talked about go hand in hand. There's times when he be like, I said we're gonna do this, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, okay, babe. Irregardless of how I feel about it, irregardless of how it happens, don't be looking at me like that, because it's hard out here. It's
Yeah.
hard, but you got to do it. Like you got to do it, and we've been married, like I said, 11 years, and there's nothing that I would trade, in at all, because each phase of our life has prepared us for the next stage.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it all, but it starts with understanding that you don't show up on your wedding day and get this crown on your head that calls you a wife.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that, and I really want to challenge all of our pretty girls out there to evaluate your why behind getting married. Is it, again, going back to what Micaiah said earlier about just having a pretty wedding? Is it about having an Instagram photo ready relationship? Is it about just going on date nights, or to fulfill some spaces that really need to be healed by the Lord? I can tell you in my case, I was having difficulties when I started to journey into, the idea of getting married again. First of all, people kept telling me I want to get married, and I was like, "Wait a minute, but I don't want to get married right now." But as I did start to want to get married, it really was cultivated around my troubles with being a single mother. And not to say that some of those things will be relieved when you come into covenant, as I go into covenant with my future husband. However, wanting a bona fide babysitter is not the reason to get married. So even as I and as you are in your preparation to progress toward that relationship, right? Just continue to evaluate your why, because again, as the guy spoke about, your relationship ain't just for y'all; it's for the people that your marriage is called to. Your
Yeah.
marriage could be breaking generational curses. We are meant to be kingdom shakers and darkness, kingdom of darkness, the disruptors, right? So it can't just be about fulfilling fulfilling our selfish needs, rather, because it's so much greater than that. And that is why our litmus test has to be: is he a man of valor? Does he uphold the standards that the Bible says that a husband should be? Am I a virtuous woman? That should be our litmus test of uh where we should be before we go into a marriage. Because I would venture to say, if your husband don't even know God, um you are probably in some deep trouble there. And I'm not
Ooh, we about to
saying,
go there. We about to go
yeah.
there. About to go
And
there.
and I'm not saying, because I know some of us might be called to bring their husband to the Lord, right? But that's definitely a conversation that you had to have with the Lord, right? And that's what I think it comes down to. Because if you are graced to do that, then that's your grace, you know. But for others, it's going to be a man of God. Is going to be someone who, is a man after God's heart, and ultimately that should be the litmus test. Is what the Bible says a man should be. He's certainly not gonna be no man that's beating on you, hitting on you, abusing you, or nothing like that. And I'm sure my sister over here is about to say that you might bring him to Christ, but even if it's a man of God, it don't mean that he got to pray like you pray, that he got to worship like you worship. That doesn't negate the relationship that he has with God, because I see that happen with a lot of people. Is that it's troublesome for them because for some reason we may get levels when it comes to our relationship with God.
Agree, agree. I equally think that, you know, I feel like there's certain things I'm not going to say in this podcast. I feel like we went in a rabbit hole. We're going to be here for 8 hours, but I do think that, the baseline to all of this is that, I'm very much a conduit of therapy. Y'all probably don't know too much about that aspect on this platform, or maybe you hear it, but if these are things that you're like, oh my goodness, after this, I don't know if I even want to do it. I would say, you know, let you begin to work out those issues in therapy,
Yeah.
because if you're let's dispel this right now, that being a wife is a phenomenal thing.
Yes.
It is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. It's
I
beautiful.
can't
And
wait, y'all.
while we are talking about the hardships, the purpose of this was talking about the hardships of not knowing how to be a wife. Being a wife is a very, very beautiful thing. It is an honor and a privilege to stand beside someone and be a wife. But if you are not ready, let's take the steps to get ready.
Yeah.
Your steps could be recognizing that you got some things you need to work out, in therapy and prayer, however you begin to take that journey. Our point is to take the journey.
Yeah.
To take the journey. If this is something that you're interested in, you want to do, you're thinking about it, let's start having these uncomfortable conversations now.
Yeah.
Enough of just the surface level. You gotta be submissive, you gotta be obedient, you gotta be a wife. While those are important, and I'm not discrediting that, to dig past that is to really take a look at, what areas do I need to be the best version of myself. However
Yeah.
I get there, I need to be the best version of myself, so that when my husband's comes, there is nothing broken, nothing missing, and I'm well equipped and I'm well prepared for what it is that I'm asking for, because you're doing yourself in your relationship and him a disservice if you're ill equipped.
Yeah.
If you show up on the outside as a wife and internally you're still battling things that you have not let go of.
Yeah.
So we don't want to discredit the idea that this is such a hard thing. It has its challenges,
Yeah.
but overall it's a beautiful thing. But you need to be prepared for it to be beautiful. You need to be thinking about the kind of wife that you are supposed to be to the spouse that is uniquely designed for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Uniquely designed for you. And I understand we're not perfect. We are not robotic. That we're going to make mistakes, and we're not saying that that's a bad thing. We've all made mistakes. You heard aspects of our testimony where we got it wrong, but we're sharing with you just so that if you find yourself in those spaces, you can like, you know what? Let me do something different because I know I don't want to do that way. And that is the point of this episode, is to show you that it has its hardships.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
Yeah.
Most days it ain't pretty.
Yeah.
It ain't pretty. You can't dress it up, but it can be a beautiful thing if you prepare.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as if you were in school and preparing for a test. Well, a studious person would open up the book, read it, study to apply the material. It's the same thing in your journey to wifehood. You're going to make those mistakes. You're going to learn from those mistakes. You're going to adapt from those mistakes, and you're going to move forward to be a better version of yourself. But without that introspection, without the wise counsel, without the level of maturation and the process of being mature, without all of those things, you can't say you're fully equipped for what it is that you're asking for.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is to wait on God's timing. Allow, just going back to going through the process. Don't decide that your process should be a year and with it. You know, it don't matter if it takes 10 years. The tools that you gain during that process is not only going to benefit you when it comes to your marriage, but your destiny in this fullness, right? And a lot of times, men and women will try to go before God, and get weary in the process and try to put their hands in who their mate should be, right? Like just wait on him, and child. Let me tell y'all, this is a lesson that I have to learn the hard way. And one scripture that the Lord gave to me for encouragement, it says, uh, though it tarry, wait for it. It will not tarry. It will surely come. It will surely come. And at some point, when the Lord ordains, it will come to pass, and it will be beautiful. When the Lord has something for us, it's going to surpass everything we could imagine. It could be. There are going to be things on your list which. Even when my sister talks about the list earlier, our determination literally deters us from what God is willing over our life, and we want to be in God's perfect will. So, just allow God to do his thing. Take your hands out of it. Just be still, and just allow him to take you through the process.
Yeah. I think my final remarks would be, me and my husband talked about this the other night, and we would talk about faith being an action word. And you can't say you want to do something without putting the work behind it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just an idea and it never comes off the ground, right? So it's the same thing in your journey to being a wife. You in your journeys, or in your time of thinking about the kind of wife that you want to be, wake up and start being that.
Yeah.
It's every day it's going to be that decision to wake up and to be that wife, even when there's no husband
Yeah.
or no indication of one coming.
Yeah.
Or maybe you are that wife and you're thinking, well, wow, I need to make a couple changes. Start making them now, even
Yeah.
if you don't recognize them. Start making them now. Because if you're saying you want this, it's equally as important to put the work behind it. Put the work behind it, and you will see if you're in a marriage where maybe we hit some pressure points because maybe you're doing things in a different way and you want to make those changes. Start doing them now. Start doing them now, and it's okay if they don't see it right away. Because remember, you taking years. It took you years to cultivate where you are. It may take years for them to recognize that you're making those changes.
Yeah.
Be patient. There's no race. There's no rush. We are not in a rush. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with them, because it's a process, but it's a
Yeah.
fulfilling one if you walk it out the right way.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Whew. We made it. We made it. We made it. We
Yes.
made it through season 1
Yeah.
of Pretty Girl Be Hill. We took some time earlier before we filmed to reflect, and I'm definitely having a moment of gratitude for 7 episodes a moment of reflection that we have really covered a lot of topics, and we see your feedback. We see, the shares and the likes and the comments that we've touched on so much, that have been going on in your lives and our lives as well, because we're walking this out right alongside you. And we're just grateful to be a platform where we
Yeah.
can grow and learn together. We are in no way, shape, or form experts. We know we get it wrong. Listen,
Yes. All the
listen,
time.
all the time.
A win and
But
a prayer.
we're Right, but we're walking this out together. We're walking this out with you, and we just, we hope that you are encouraged, motivated, and inspired after
Yes.
listening to us, and that we're growing together in this thing called life. So we appreciate all the support, all the love, all the comments, the likes, the follows on all of our socials, on the lives, on YouTube, our audio alert. Guys, we are international. There are people in other countries that watch little old us, and we don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
And we
Glory
really
to
just want to
God.
take this moment to express our gratitude
Yeah.
and just reflect and just be very grateful for season one.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for every episode, for the transparency,
Yeah.
for the vulnerability, and and all that we've done. And we want to thank you guys, literally from the bottom of our hearts, for taking your time out to watch Little Old Us.
Yes. Thank you
Little
so
Old Us.
much. We really appreciate it.
So we can we DJ, can you cue the burn 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 burn? We are
Hey.
so grateful to close out this season with you guys. Stay tuned for season 2. The flyer will drop a few weeks before we come back. We're going to take this break, some rest, enjoy the
Yes.
holidays,
Rest, y'all.
have a pretty girl Christmas and a pretty girl New Year.
Yes.
And however, whatever you celebrate, just enjoy. And we will see you guys after our hiatus. And until then, bye,
Bye,
pretty
pretty girl.
girls.